co-host.
Like, where do you want the recording? Locally or in cloud? Because I think in cloud is better. You can share the link.
Yeah, I think in cloud is good. Who's recording?
Does this disappear? The one in the cloud.
Just initiate it from your end, your host. Just initiate.
I'm actually seeing there's some recording ongoing, but I'm not so certain who's recording.
Yeah, it's okay. It's actually open.
So
Or you stop the recording. No, it's going to the website. It's not going to any.
Okay. Philip, Ebueka, put Esther as the co-host, please.
Individuals.
Will be the one to start us off. Then Nikita will continue from there, I guess.
Good morning, everyone. I hope I'm audible. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much, Chris. So I don't think we'll take much time in the introductions. I'll leave it to Nikita and Chris to introduce the speaker, and then I'm hoping we'll really enjoy the session and we'll get to learn a lot. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Samantha. Hi, everyone. My name is Nikita Muthuri. I am a level 5 medical student at UON. I will be co-moderating today's session along with Arisi, who will introduce himself in a bit. So this is the first session of several in a study abroad talk series. Today we're going to have Dr. Mora, who did her MBCHB here, talk to us about her experience studying in Australia. The format, the program is very simple today. We're going to have a presentation from Dr. Mora, and then after that, we'll go into a question and answer session so that we can make it a bit interactive. Over to you, Arisi.
Okay, thank you so much, Kinita. Thank you so much to everyone. Samantha, appreciate AMSUN and the entire committee. So we like to thank them all for making this possible. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Mora. So first of all, I should mention she's an alumni of our school. She finished in 2015. She'll tell you all that. And currently she's in Australia doing work that she'll elaborate more. And so from today, we are going to get information for those of you who are very interested in moving or working in Australia, which is going to be provided. And I hope you guys will learn a lot from it. Feel free to interact, especially when we open the floor to questions. And I hope you learn from this. So I encourage you to participate. If you have any questions, if you have any clarification, this is all for you as students to learn from it. So I hope you will find it educative and informative as possible. So I guess it's 10:07. I can let Dr. Mora take over and start our presentation. Thank you so much for joining. And tell your friends to also join who have not yet joined. So share it widely and encourage them to join. So Dr. Mora, over to you. You can start.
Thank you guys for the lovely introduction. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we
Thumbs
can.
up. I think you guys should use I think there's reactions down there you can use that I can gauge how you guys are doing. So thank you so much for having me today. It's so much a pleasure, and thanks a lot, Arisi, for organizing this. I wish I had such a thing when I was back in uni. So thanks for inviting me to this session today. So as you heard, my name is Mora and I'm currently in Australia, and please feel free to ask me any question, whether it's personal, whether it's professional. And I'm just gonna use my PowerPoint presentation so that I make sure I don't miss anything. So I'm just gonna share it on the screen if that's okay. Oh, host disabled participant screen sharing. Can I share my screen?
A moment, let me just sort that out.
That's okay.
Uh-huh.
Others, feel free to ask me any questions. So basically what I'm going to talk about is my experience from your end to working in Kenya to coming here, what you have to do to practice here, what pathways you have possible. So I'll touch on a couple of things.
Are you able to? I've made you co-host.
All right, let me just, okay, yeah, that's good, thanks. Can you guys see that?
Yes, we can.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
Right, so I'm just gonna jump to the first slide, and just to give you a brief overview of the geography of Australia. As you can see from, actually this is, right now it's 5 or 9 p.m. So we are 7 hours ahead. So there's a big time difference, so it's evening here for me. So basically in terms of the geography, as you can see from the slide, we have 6 states in Australia, and I'm currently based in Queensland, which is also quite a large state as well. So we have 6 states and we're based in Queensland. I'm based in Queensland, and you can see how far it is from Nairobi. It's quite a long journey. I think when I came, it took me almost 20 something hours, stopped from Nairobi, we went to Abu Dhabi, which was 14 hours, and then went back to Brisbane, which is another 14 hours. So it's quite far from Kenya. So that's just to give you an overview of the geography of Australia. So a little bit about me before I jump into the little nitty-gritties about medical things. So my name is Moraz. You've heard, a girl cannot tell her age, so I won't tell my age. I'm from Nairobi, Kenya, and I arrived in Australia in 2018. So just a brief background about my journey. I finished UN in 2015. I joined in 2010, so 2010 to 2015. And then I did the compulsory 1-year internship. So I did it in Kericho District Hospital. And unfortunately that year we had the big doctors strike, so it quite impacted our internship. So I think it actually lasted for 1 year and a couple of months. So it was quite a challenging year. So I worked as a medical officer in public and private hospitals. So immediately after I finished my internship in Kericho, I worked in, came back to Nairobi. I was hoping to get that permanent in Kericho, but I think there was a bit of challenges in the system. So I worked in Nairobi West Hospital. I worked in the ICU. I worked in KNH in ICU as well. And then the last job before I came to Australia, I worked as a medical officer in Kakuma refugee camp. I don't know if anyone has heard of Kakuma refugee camp. It's one of the biggest camps in the world. So looking after refugee patients, it's in Turkana. Then a couple of other stuff I've done. I did a certificate in biostats and epidemiology from University of London, and also did a certificate in leadership and management in health. Those are both online courses, so trying to just improve my knowledge as I was working. And then I made that decision to come to Australia, which is usually quite a bold one, because you're leaving everything behind, you're leaving your family behind, you're leaving your jobs behind. So it's quite a bold decision, which you have to really think through before you move. So I arrived in Australia in 2018. And yeah, there's a big culture shock, and settling down as a whole was pretty hard. When I came here, I didn't know anyone at all. So I had to start from scratch and building those connections. So I studied in Griffith University. So I did a master's in advanced health services management. So it's a 2-year master's course. And meanwhile, when I was doing my job, I did a bit of casual jobs, because Australia is quite an expensive place to stay. And the school fees then was, so it's a 2-year course. So 1 year, it's $30,000. So if you calculate that, that's almost 30,000 times 70. I think $1 Australian at the moment is 70 Kenya shillings. So it's quite a lot of money. So I had to just kind of help I was really lucky because my parents could pay my school fee, but I really wanted to pay my rent, and I'm going to talk about the financial part a bit later. So I did a bit of casual jobs to pay for my rent and, get a bit of pocket money. I did a bit of volunteering work as well. And volunteering is quite big in Australia if you have to make professional connections, if you have to get jobs. So I did volunteering when I was studying. I did, it's called Matter Refugee Health, because it already sparked my interest when I did my role in the Kakuma. So I was really interested in refugee health, the public health space. So I did volunteer at Matter Refugee Health. And they have an organization here called the Queensland Program of Assistance to Survivors of Torture and Trauma. So Australia resettles a lot of refugees from Sudan, from Iraq, from Afghanistan. So we kind of looked at that space. So I also was the postgraduate student representative at the School of Medicine. So just kind of getting myself engaged in different activities. So I was also elected by the mayor to be one of the 40 Brisbane student ambassadors. And then I was also part of a steering committee in a 2-year CALD means culturally and linguistically diverse community. So Australia is quite diverse. It has a lot of languages. It has a lot of people from different multicultural backgrounds. So I did that project as well. So as you can see, I was studying those 2 years, but I was doing a couple of other things on the side. So I also did research piece. So of course it's, I was doing my master's, so I did a dissertation on refugee health because I was very interested in that space. So I did volunteer at the place, so they offered me to do my research there, and it's currently being published. And I'm also going to present it at an upcoming conference. That's the Australian College of Health Services Management, and Canberra is one of the states. So in the last trimester of school, I did something called work integrated learning, which this is like an internship or a placement. So I did it at a place called Metro South Health, and that's like, it's part of the government. It's like Nairobi County, so it's part of the government health system. And then it was, that's when the COVID-19 started. So we kind of started working from home and, you know, going to the office and going to the hospitals. Then I got a couple of awards just to mention there. And then I graduated officially in 2020 because it was a 2-year program. And then I began my first job where I did volunteer. So that's why it's really important. If you're planning to come to Australia, you have to volunteer because that's the only way you can get those formal connections. So immediately I graduated, I got my job at the Mater, and that's where I've been working at the moment. And then I'm also working at the government, which is the Metro South Health, as a program manager. And I really don't want to go into details of what I do there, because I know you want to know more about coming here. So basically, if you want to come here as doctors in Australia, there's many pathways, but the one that we usually follow is called the Australia Medical Council. So the standard pathway is usually what most people use to come to Australia. And the standard pathway basically means is you get your degree certified from Kenya, and then you do the AMC part 1, which is the clinical exam, and then you do part 2, which is the practical exam. So I just wanted to put that slide there to show you roughly how much it costs. For the MCQ, it's $2,720. That's around almost $250,000. And then for the clinical exams, it's even more expensive. It's almost $4,000. Actually, I think now it's even a bit higher. So, and if you don't want to do the clinical exam, you can do something called workplace-based assessment. So after you pass your part 1 MCQs, instead of doing the clinical exam, which I hear is very, very tough, I haven't done it. So you can do the workplace-based assessment where you go to specified hospitals and it gets supervised for a couple of months, and then they give you the certificate. So that is roughly how much the exams costs. In addition to doing part 1 and part 2 of the medical exam, you have to do an English test. And if you want to be a doctor here, it's usually one of the highest. You know, you have to pass, each of these tests have different cutoffs. So the most common tests I put there, it's Ielts. Can't remember the full name, but Ielts is one of the main English tests that people do. That's the one I did as well. Then we have PTE is another kind of English test, and we have OET. So the most common people do is Ielts and PTE. And these are the 4 sections that each of these English tests usually test. They test for listening skills, they test for reading, writing. So I'm just gonna move this, writing and speaking. So the English tests are not really hard, especially for us from Kenya, because you're being taught in English. The people I usually see struggle a little bit is maybe people from countries like maybe India, or like countries where they usually don't speak English as their core languages. So if you're from Kenya, it's quite easy to pass this exam. You just have to do a bit of revision, and that's about it. It's not really hard. And the price for doing this test roughly costs around $400. So that's around 40 to 50,000 Kenya shillings. So Arisi had given me a couple of questions to kind of look after. So I just kind of pulled these questions to see if I can answer a little bit. So is the work experience after qualifying required before taking the exams? Not really. There's no criteria for taking the exam. The only criteria you have for taking the part 1 of the AMC exam is for you to have the degree. So you have to finish your medical exam, and then you can take the test, basically. So you can, there's no other requirement. So long as you can certify your degree, you can sit for the exam. How long are the results valid for before you have to retake them? I think it's about 3 years. It usually depends on the states, but commonly it's around 3 years. So if you take AMC part 1, let's say in 2021, and you don't do the AMC 2 in 3 years, then they're going to nullify that, and you'll have to start from the beginning. So it takes around 3 years before you have to retake the results. what are the things that give people competitive advantages when applying abroad? So this is very, very critical because some of you might want to come as students. When coming as a student, I think it's the easier way of joining Australia because I did come as a student. So it makes you learn the health system a little bit before you actually think of coming here. So some of the things that I think gave me competitive advantage was things like volunteering. So I kind of had that professional networking, things like, these positions held, like some leadership positions in uni. So Australia really, really likes those things in your CV. So they think that you're actually doing more than just the medical stuff. So you're a bit holistic as a professional. So how early should you start the application process? You have to start from way, way, way before. For me, I did start, I think, around 6 months before I came here. So you have to start the visa process quite early. And I used an agency called Australian Education Consultants. And if you want me to send these things after the video, I can just put them in the chat maybe, or send it to Arisi. So it's called Australian Education Consultants. They have an office based in Westlands. So it's an agency which helps students who want to come to Australia so they can advise you where to go, where it's much cheaper, what you want to study. So you have to start the application process, at least give yourself even 6 months because the visa process can take a long time. What benefits are there? So here, the quality of life is pretty good. And I was telling Arisi before, is some doctors even come from Canada, they come from UK to come and work here in Australia because the quality of life is quite good and the pay is also much better and the working environment is pretty good as well. So there's a lot of benefits here in Australia, to be honest. And also the climate is good. So for me, I'm in Queensland. Queensland is known as the warmest city in Australia. And for me, I don't like cold. So Australia, different states have different weather pattern. So if you're really keen on where to stay, you have to also check the weather pattern as well. So Queensland is known to be warm. Melbourne is known to be a bit cold. Canberra is known to be a bit cold as well. So you just have to check the temperatures of different states. The different options out there for medics. So I do know that most people want to go the medical pathway. So the easiest way is to finish internship first. It's very hard to get internship positions here in Australia because they usually, first of all, give their local graduates. So it's very important for you. And I think this is maybe what I didn't learn as well before. It's important to finish your internship first. So it's easier for you to kind of apply to be doctors here in Australia. And for some, I think I was being asked if you can just come as specialists. It's really difficult. I won't lie to you. I do know of an IMG who came from Germany, was a surgeon there, but he had to start from the junior level of GP. So I think the easiest way is finish internship, maybe work for 1 year, and then maybe you can start doing the AMC1. And I was also telling Arisi, it's very important, I think, to do AMC1 maybe before you come here, because there's something called recency of practice, and recency of practice is the number of years you haven't worked clinically. Like, for example, for me, the last time I worked in Kenya was in 2018. So if you have the more years you have that you haven't practiced, the more challenging it is to re-enter as a doctor here in Australia. And then other pathways is like the non-clinical pathway. Like for me, I do mostly the public health stuff and I do a lot of health management stuff. So you can come in as a student and do your master's, maybe master's in public health or master's in health management or even research. Some people are actually doing like more research work. So it's really, there are a couple of different options as well, because I think you need to try and remove yourself from the crowd, you know, because of the doctors, and what will you do to make yourself have that edge when you're applying for a job here, because it's quite competitive as well. So another question was smooth process of the AMC exams. So we've gone through the application process. So you have to create, if you just Google online AMC, so all the information is there on the website. So it's called Australian Medical Council. It has all the requirements there. It has the application process. And I know right now because of COVID-19, it's a bit tricky. I think they had to postpone some of the exams, but in terms of application process, the AMC website has listed all the criteria, all the fees, all the locations as well. I think for AMC, they usually do it every month here in Australia. But if you're in Kenya, I think the nearest one you can go is, I think, Dubai, if I'm not wrong. But I will encourage someone to come and at least do the AMC exam here, book it's really an investment you have to make. It's quite expensive, but you can book maybe and come and do the exam here and kind of have a feel of how Australia is before you decide to come here. Difficulty level of the exam. So I'm planning to do the part 1 soon, but from what I've had people say is part 1 is quite easy. You just have to study and that's about it. But part 2, the clinical exam, is really, really hard because you have to go in different rotations, and Australian health system, the way they do their things, it's quite different from Kenya. And not in terms of clinical content, but in terms of how they communicate, the things that they want you to do. So the clinical exam is really, really difficult. And sometimes the accent comes in, and Australian accent is really, really hard sometimes. So all the time I hear, pardon, what are you saying? What are you saying, mate? You know, so the accent becomes quite a tricky part. So people prefer to go, once you've done the part 1, you go to the working-based assessment. So you go to, there's some hospitals within Australia which do the work-based assessment. And so you can apply there and do the working-based assessment. So costs inclusive of travel and accommodation, it's really expensive. Australia is not a cheap place, especially when you're coming in and maybe you're staying here for a long time. So you have to really plan yourself. I would maybe encourage someone to stay for maybe at least 3 months, because you usually get, if you want to come here maybe to do the exams, you can apply for the visitor visa and they can give you 3 months. So you can come and do the exams, stay here a bit and just see how Australia is. And in terms of travel, the air ticket is around $2,000, I think, return ticket. So of course, without COVID, because now COVID, I don't even think you can come here. So with COVID, the Australian borders have never opened. So I've never been home since 2018, which is another challenge as well. So being abroad is not easy as well, because you tend to miss home a lot. In terms of accommodation is quite expensive. And what they have here in Australia is things called share house. So when you come in as a student, it's much cheaper to get a share house with other people. So you kind of distribute the rent, so it's a bit cheaper. Is there any kind of professional support after the exams? I'm not gonna lie to you, there's none. It's up to you to really be proactive and get maybe mentors to support you. There's no professional support really here. Everything you have to do it by yourself. Any extracurricular activities, as I've pointed out, Australia is quite big on things like volunteering and maybe even sports. They really want to see how you are outside of class and outside of your professional life as well. Options for financing studies abroad. It's really hard to get a scholarship. So this is your personal investment. You take it as an investment. And I think someone was telling me for them to get like a full registration, they use almost $1 million or 1.5 million Kenya shillings. So it's really an investment you have to be able to sacrifice. Any specialities that take generally more IMGs, I will say it's much easier to come as a GP. So it's quite hard to just come in straight and go to specialist pathway. It's easier to come from internship, and maybe after 1 year of practicing there, you can come in, do the part 1 of the exam, become a GP, and then now from the GP here, you can now stream to other specialties. It's much easier when you start as a junior doctor here. That's much easier. So any specialty, really, if you're competent and you pass all the exams, there's no specialty that is more friendly to IMGs than the other. But what I've seen most IMGs doing is they become GP, and GP is also like a specialty. You become like a GP consultant. So that's a specialty of its own. So you have to take exams and then you become like a GP fellow. So it's a specialty actually, being a GP. How often are the exams administered locally? So here in Australia, they do the MCQ exams are every month. So it's quite easy. If you're already here in Australia, then you can do the exams. It's usually every month. But for the clinical exam, because of COVID, they have cut that down a bit. So I think they do it, I think, after every 2-3 months. So it's a bit tricky because of COVID as well. I've talked about the English proficiency tests. How different are the patients from the ones in Kenya? Or these ones know their things. They know exactly what the rules are. They know the boundaries are. So these are people who are well educated. The patients are quite well educated. So you have to really know what you're telling them, and they'll ask you questions. The medical legal system is quite tight here. The lawyers are ready to pounce on you. So the patients here really do know their rights, and they do know the diagnoses. They do know the diseases. So they're quite knowledgeable. Challenges. There are quite a lot of challenges. It's quite a new health system, and it's quite complex to navigate it. There's a lot of not really a lot of, but I haven't really experienced much racism, to be honest, but there's that unconscious bias within the system. And I haven't faced much racism, to be honest. It's quite a calm country, and there's so many people from different countries as well. So it's not really pronounced. Ability to find spouse, that I have no idea. So that one is quite subjective, depends on what you're looking for. We have a Kenyan community here as well. So we have a community here called Kenyans in Queensland. So they're fellow Kenyans, they're fellow Africans. So that one is quite subjective as well. I've talked about cost of living and the system. So these are the other, I just put this slide to also say these are the other things I do outside my work. I have a book club, you know, I kind of like reading novels and other kind of books. We have a community association here, Kenyans in Queensland, and I'm the treasurer, so that keeps me busy as well. I'm also preparing for my AMC exams, because even if I'm doing things like public health and policy work, once you have that registration here, you even get higher paying jobs as well. So just having that recognition is really important. So I have my hobbies there, and I like giving back to the community. And thanks, Arisi and team, for putting this together, because I wish I had this kind of talk before I finished. Maybe I would have done things a little bit differently. I think I would have done my MC1 when I was still back in Kenya, so that when I come here, I just go to MC2 and, you know, look for a job as well. So it's good to have these kind of things and make sure you take advantage of them, and of course, start a family soon. I think that's it for me. And if you have any questions, the lessons I've learned, I've learned quite a lot of lessons. The journey is not easy. It's filled with ups and downs. You need to have a lot of resilience and a lot of positive attitude. I came here, I literally didn't know anyone. So you have to really have a really positive attitude. I think the first 3 months were pretty hard, but with time I met new people, and it became a bit easier. Very important to do professional networking. You can do all the exams, you can do your part 1, you can do your part 2, but if you don't have the networking, you will not get any job at all. And for me personally, not being proud or anything, for me, really, I've never had to like really apply or interview for a job because of the networking. I've been able to get jobs quite easily. So my director just calls and says, hey, there's a job here, you're really willing to take? So that networking is quite important here in Australia, because it's really hard to get a job, especially if you don't have the local work experience. So it's quite hard. So it's really good to get this networking. It's important to have a mentor. I do have a mentor who has gone through the whole process, became a GP, and is also a specialist now here in Australia. And I also have a mentor who, because I'm quite interested in research and building my capacity as a public health practitioner in the refugee health space. So I do have a mentor in that space as well. So it's important to have a mentor who's going to guide you through that journey. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there. I think there's much growth when you take yourself out of your comfort zone. So it's really good to put yourself up there. It's okay not to be okay. Take action. For me, I think my eye-opening moment in Kenya was once the strike came in and we weren't being paid for so many months. It was quite frustrating to work in the health system in Kenya, but it also has its own good things because you're able to learn, you know. But for me, I really thought I would want to see what's out there, and I'm not sure where the next plan is for me because I have a couple of years in here, but I think I like the work-life balance here, but I'm really willing to give back to the community back home. Work hard, be adaptable, be flexible, especially here in Australia, the health system and the workers, the way they like doing their jobs, you have to be really adaptable and flexible and just show that you're really quite eager to learn. This is just a couple of pictures from me to show you my little journey. You can see me and my mom there when I was young. This, I think the picture on my right, my upper right, is when I was graduating actually from med school. That was in 2015. Me and my younger brothers are really way older now. If you go to my left, on the lower side, that's me and the mayor. So that's when we were elected to become the Brisbane International Student Ambassadors. And on my right, to the lower level, that is when I graduated last year with my master's, and I was quite humbled to become the student speaker during my graduation ceremony. So these are things that really put you out there and make you make those meaningful connections. Feel free to connect with me. That's my email address. If you have any questions away from this session, I'm happy to answer, and that's my LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mura. That was a very fantastic session, short to the point and answered all the questions that had been forwarded. But there are a few more on the chat box, and I'm sure people will be unmuting themselves as we go on. Is my audio okay?
I think you have some background noise. There's some echo.
All right, how is it now?
It's better.
Okay, sawa sawa. So I can kick off the Q&A session with a question myself, and then I will be reading out the ones in the chat box and inviting people to raise your hand. Then you can be invited to speak directly to Dr. Mura, so that we avoid having two people asking a question at once out loud. So for me, the first question is, why did you pick Australia and not elsewhere? What drew you to the country?
That's a really good question, actually. So it wasn't much of a thought, but my top 3 priorities was either Australia, UK, or Canada. And for me, I talked to a couple of people who I knew worked as doctors in Australia, in the UK, and Canada. Canada was out for me because I hate cold, and there's a lot of cold in Canada, so I didn't want to go to Canada. The UK was quite a really close option for me, but I had some of the doctors in UK actually really struggle with the health system, the NHS. They're quite overworked, and some of those doctors come here in Australia to practice. So I narrowed down to Australia because I hear the doctors here, they're paid quite well and the quality of life is quite good. And I narrowed down to Queensland because Queensland has a good climate, and the cost of life is not as expensive as, let's say, Melbourne or Sydney. So Queensland is a bit, it's like Nakuru, let's say, for example. So it's not Sydney, it's not Melbourne, which are quite expensive. So Queensland is quite a neutral area. Yeah.
Okay, so you basically thought about where you'd thrive the most in terms of the people, the weather, the cost of living. Okay.
Yes, it was an all-round decision.
I see.
Sorry?
The work hours, the work-life balance makes sense.
Yes, for sure. Honestly, I've talked to quite a lot of people now because I've been here. This is my 3rd year, and Australia, among all those countries, has quite a good work-life balance for sure.
Right. Okay, so we have a question from, oh dear. We have a question from Esther Kitulu. What do you mean by doctors are paid quite well? How much is that?
Okay, so it depends. For the entry level, I do know they do pay around 100,000. So here they usually pay in terms of per year. So the pay is every 2 weeks. So here it's not per month. They pay, the salary comes every 2 weeks. But when you calculate it in 1 year, it comes to around 100,000. That's an average. So $100,000, it's like, who's good in math? You guys should be good in maths. So $100,000 Australian dollars, it's like 70 million, I reckon.
And does the
cost of living as well is equally high, but not as high, especially if you're working as a doctor here. Doctors are the highest level, the highest paid professionals here in Australia. So it's quite a prestigious job. And so averagely, I do know as a GP, they earn between 100 to 150,000. And I think once you enter as level 1, every year they kind of increase a bit. So compared to the rates in UK, I hear the doctors in UK say here, they pay a bit more.
Okay.
And as a specialist, of course, it's even higher, $200,000 a year, $300,000 a year. That's quite a good money, I think.
Speaking of specialist payment, I see a question from George. He's asking, how hard is it to join a clinical master's program, for example, surgery specialty?
I'm not going to lie, it's, of course, you won't say never, but it's quite challenging. I have a friend who came in from, actually he's from Ghana, but he did his surgery degree in Germany. So Germany is also not, it's a good country. So he came here to kind of come straight into the surgery specialty, and it was hard. They gave him quite a lot of stress. So he had to start from AMC1 as a junior doctor, AMC2. So I will really, really advise you to, it's hard, it's really hard. I'm not going to lie to you. It's hard. And they usually first take their local doctors here, the Australian local doctors who graduated here. And the spaces are quite competitive, and the spaces for specialties are very limited. And they usually give their local people first, for sure. So I'll advise, if someone wants to study surgery, just come here as a junior doctor, and then you can progress with the specialties here.
I see. All right. So we have a question from MD Abroad. If you don't mind renaming yourself, that would help. How do you apply for a work-based assessment after doing AMC1?
So if you Google, if you just have a look at the AMC website, maybe I can type it here in the chat. The meeting. So just Google AMC. If you Google the AMC website, it has all the different hospitals. It's quite a few hospitals because they want to be quite thorough. So if you pass your AMC1, you can just look at those hospitals and just apply straight to the hospitals. It's very competitive as well, the working-based assessments, and they usually have some criteria. Some hospitals prefer someone who's done both AMC1 and AMC2. Some hospitals like someone who's done MC1, so they're quite different, and different hospitals require different things. And apart from working-based assessment, there's something they do called observership. So a medical observer is someone you really not hands-on with the patient, so you have a supervisor at all times. So before you go for the working-based assessment, what some people do is you do your AMC1, and then you apply for a hospital where you do observership. So you just kind of rotate in different rotations with the supervisor without being really hands-on. So for you to understand the health system. And then from there, you can go to the work-based assessment, because some hospitals require you to have, like, let's say 6 months experience in an Australian health system. So it's quite tricky. If you're already here in Australia, the work-based assessment can work for you. But if you're coming from outside, MC2 might be the better option. Or some people have done this way. They've done MC1, and then they come to Australia, they study, let's say they take a 2-year course, they study a master's in, let's say, public health or health management or whatever. And then during that time, you can now do your working-based assessment, or you can do your clinical exam. But just keep in mind that it's gonna be expensive, because the master's is also not a cheap program.
All right. So sorry about that. What do you think you could have done in undergrad to make the transition easier?
That's a really good question. In terms of undergrad, really, you just want to pass the exam and get 50% and above and finish school. So that was my focus then. I really didn't even know I'm gonna come to Australia. So if you're in school, I'll just suggest, just make sure you pass your exam. Because when you come to Australia, they don't look at what you've done much in Kenya, to be honest, apart from your degree certificate. I'm not gonna lie to you. So when you write your CV to applying for jobs in Australia, they don't care about what you've done in Kenya. So long as you show them, this is the certificate I got. If it's your medical certificate, that's what they're interested in. They're not interested in any other thing. They really value the local experience here in Australia. So if you want to come here, maybe for the first 3 months, even on maybe visitor visa or whatever kind of visa, make sure you do some local stuff. You can do volunteering somewhere. You can do even an observership somewhere, you know, just make sure you have that local experience. But in terms of undergrad, just make sure you pass your exam and get a medical certificate. Okay. I mean, your medical degree, that's it, yeah.
So volunteering while here is not as impactful to them as volunteering while you're in Australia.
Exactly. So they want the local experience here. They really don't care if you volunteered back at home. So the most important things, if you want to come to Australia, is get your medical degree and do your internship. Internship is really critical because there's no spots for interns for abroad here in Australia. It's quite competitive. So it's important to do your internship in Kenya.
Another question related to pay. Are MEd students paid as they study?
Sorry?
A question on pay again. Are MEd students paid as they study?
So MEd students are paid as they study because it's like you're working, it's like in Kenya basically. So you're working, but you're also getting paid. So the way the system here is, once you've finished, maybe if you're a local graduate, you've done internship in Australia, you become postgraduate year 1. So they call it PG1. So there's the first year after internship, then the second year, and then after the second, third year, you can now go become a registrar. So a registrar is someone who's being trained to become a specialty. So you're still being paid as a doctor, basically, even if you're doing your MEd. So you're still being paid as a doctor. How do you apply for MEd after getting into Australia? So that I'm not gonna lie, I'm not too sure about that, but I think they usually have exams that they do to join that fellow. So every specialty has different exams that they need to do. So you have, I'm here, it's very competitive because the local graduates want all the positions. So it's quite competitive really. And sometimes the system takes the local graduates only, for example. So you just have to do an exam and really put yourself up there and become the best. So in terms of application, there's an exam you have to do, and then each fellow, like each specialty, they usually kind of apply, I think. I'm not too sure, but I can take that and then I can come back with the answer.
Okay. How did you take care of your mental health during your first few months in Australia? Considering that it's a new environment, you said you didn't know anyone. It was a bold move. A question from James Kamau.
I think this is the most important question, honestly. All the questions are quite important, but so many people come here in Australia and the mental health takes them to a totally dark place and they lose the priority that they came to do in Australia. Some enter into drugs to kind of run away from the problems. When you come as a student, there's not enough money because it's just the bills keep coming in. So for me, really, what kept me going is, first of all, I'm a Christian, so I've always turned to God and I usually pray a lot. And I had really close friends of mine. I'm quite a social person and I have so many friends, but I have two close friends that, you know, we usually just talk and share our problems, and me keeping in contact back at home, because you can imagine I haven't seen my family since 2018. It's not a very easy thing to do. So you have to keep talking to them. And I won't lie to you that sometimes you sit in the house and cry. Sometimes crying helps me because as a human being, you haven't seen your family in so long, or maybe you just feel a bit stressed, maybe the challenges here abroad. So sometimes I just cry and I feel a bit better, but really engaging myself in other activities like, you know, the Kenyans in Queensland, the community association, just doing things that I love, like traveling, reading a book. So that keeps me quite engaged, because I think an idle mind is really the devil's workshop. And there's quite a lot of drugs here in Australia, really, there's cocaine, there's whatever. So sometimes I see people, I'm not perfect, but I do sometimes people come in here from Kenya and they go to the wrong group of people. So they start taking drugs and doing all that kind of thing. So it's quite easy to be influenced to kind of lose your direction. So just keep involved with positive stuff.
All right. So I invite anyone who has questions that they haven't put in the chat box yet to raise the hand. I hope you know how to raise your hand on Zoom. Then you can go ahead and ask a question directly to Dr. Mora.
Yes, Nikita, thank you so much. Before others join in, I've gotten some questions on my inbox, but I'd like to encourage everyone, please don't feel shy. Just ask a question if you can. So my first question, I think this one is for me. So you've said doing these exams is will be expensive, coming to around 2 million. So the first question is, do you think doing these exams is worth it? Like, will you get your investment back? So that's my first question. That's what I've gotten in the inbox.
I'll be very honest, because I've had terrible stories. There's a project I'm doing at the Mater Hospital here where I'm kind of coordinating a project working with IMGs from refugee background, like doctors from Iraq, doctors from Afghanistan. And it is a long and painful and challenging journey, but it's worth it, but you have to really work hard for it. And there'll be ups and downs. You can still do your MC1, you can still do your MC2, and it can still take a bit of time before you get it, but I think it's worth it. It's so long as you really plan yourself very well. Make sure you just plan yourself and have everything in check. Make sure before you do anything, you've confirmed, because here in Australia, they really are quite particular on some things. So if you really plan yourself well and just be ready to know that it's a journey and it's a challenging journey, but be proactive, make sure you're well planned and study well. It's a worthy investment. I think it's quite worthy.
Thank you. I have another question here. It pertains to MC1. So the first question is, we know the second exam is done in Australia. So the first question is, this MC1, do you do it in Kenya or Is it online? Like, how do you do it? Because you said it's better you do it before you come, like in Kenya. And then also on the MC1, how do you do the revision for it? Like, do you just read your medical books, or is there a system or a guide to how you read for it? So yeah, that's just the question on the MC1.
So for MC1, it's much easier when you come and read here, but if you open the MC website, there's quite a lot of exam test sites within the world. There's some in, I think, UK, there's some in, I think, Dubai. So I think what most people usually do is they come here in Australia on like a visitor visa, and then they do the MC1, because if you want to be a doctor in Australia, then why not go all the way here and actually see how Australia is? So you can take a visitor visa for 3 months and just do the exam. But there are a couple of other examination sites, but because of COVID, you have to really check the AMC website. And if you Google AMC online, you'll check the website and you can check the sites. So because of COVID, it usually gets changed quite rapidly because different countries have different COVID rules. But what most people have done is they come here to Australia, they do the exams, and then they kind of go back. And then in terms of, what was the other one? What was the other question? Or what to study, like what books to study. So there's usually a couple of books that people want to study that are quite core books. So there's one called MC Handbook. There's one called MC, and I can write to Arisi like in an email, because I have a couple of them somewhere. So there's AMC Handbook, that's where all the questions come from. And then there's something called Recalls. So MC Recalls is like what they've been asking in the past. So it's like kind of revision of what the other people have been tested in the years before, in the months before. And it's important to have a group discussion sometimes, because it usually helps to kind of course, you know, for med school, it's important to have group discussions. And there's a lot of, like there's a Telegram page that I'm in, and there's a Facebook page that I'm in. So people share quite a lot of resources. Like there's this Telegram page, and I'm happy to share with Arisi, and then Arisi can share it with you guys. This Telegram page has doctors from all over the place asking about MC1. There's so many resources there as well. So if you just click on that Telegram link that I'll send, and then if you go to the file section, you will be so like overwhelmed with the resources there. So there's resources for surgery, psychiatry, literally everything is there. So and also the Facebook page, there's a Facebook page where people kind of share resources. If some have done an exam, let's say last month, they'll kind of send through the questions that they had. So I'm going to send you that link, and then if you're interested, you can join in that Telegram. It has quite a lot of resources. And then I'm going to send to Arisi also the core books that you need to read.
Thank you. Just one more, I've also gotten. This is an interesting one. Can someone study and live with their spouse? Like, can someone go there with their spouse and I think what he means is like, say you get married, can you come along or get a visa with your spouse and then you go both to there? Maybe your spouse is not in the medical profession. Yeah, I think that's what is meant.
So yeah, that's a good question. It depends on the type of visa you're applying to come here with. If you're coming, like for example, with a visitor visa, you had to come with a spouse, unless both of you apply under visitor visa, because visitor visa is quite short term. But if you're coming, for example, like one of my friends came in, I think last year on a student visa, which is a 2-year one. If you're taking a master course for 2 years, you can come with a spouse. So the visa will have, his or her visa will come under your visa. Although you'll have to pay it separately, but you can come with your spouse even if they're not from the medical profession. Yeah. It depends on which visa you're coming with.
I have a question for you, Dr. Mora. How feasible is it for a Kenyan doctor to get permanent residency in Australia?
Very good question. It's challenging to get a permanent residency, but there's a couple of options people usually do. But the ones I usually see that are quite successful is when you get a hospital. So once you do your AMC1 and you do your English test, you can try and get employment in a hospital. So that's why it's so hard to do it when you're back in Kenya. So if you can come here for a couple of months and kind of connect with other hospitals. So if you do your AMC1 and do the English exam, and then get a letter of employment from a hospital, because you can get, once you do your MC1 and English, you have something called limited registration. So with limited registration, you can get a job as an IMG, but you mostly work in the rural area. So all IMGs basically in Australia start from the regional area in Australia. It's very hard to get work in the cities. So the rule in Australia is all IMGs start to fill the gaps in the rural areas before they come to the cities. So if you do your MC1 and your English exam, you have the limited registration and you can apply for a job. So once you get the job can sponsor you and get permanent residence. So they pay for your whole application process, and then you can get permanent residence. Being a doctor, it's not quite hard to get, and especially now, if any of you will have been here in Australia, like right now, GP is a critical occupation. So they're being given permanent residence really, really fast here in Australia because it's a critical occupation.
The flip side of the coin is coming back to Kenya. So there's a question from Calvin on the same. How easy will it be for those who plan to come back and work in Kenya after doing the master's program in Australia to reintegrate into the Kenyan system? Does Kenya recognize the degrees acquired from Australia? And I think I would add on to that, do your colleagues accept you? Do they feel like you haven't been struggling through the system with them, or are you welcomed with open arms? What's that like?
To go back to Kenya?
Yes.
It's quite tricky. It's quite tricky because you've gone into another health system altogether. You've studied with other different people, so it's gonna be challenging to kind of blend in. But I think it's going to be really, really hard because medicine is the same medicine. Clinical content is the same clinical content. So it's just a matter of taking some time and just kind of learning things through as well. I don't think it's really difficult. The only thing is if you study here masters, I'm not sure how the process is if you go back home, because you also have to keep on keeping once you finish med school in your end, you have to get your registration as a medical doctor, and you have to keep renewing it. So for you to renew your medical registration in Kenya, you have to do CPD points. So those things are, like for me personally, I haven't been a doctor in Kenya since 2018. So it's hard for me to kind of get all the CPD points and all that kind of stuff. So you have to go through Kenya Medical, KMPD, not the union, the other one. Yeah, the board. So you have to go through the board to kind of make sure that your registration is well aligned to the Kenyan system. But I don't think it's hard to reintegrate because medicine is still the same medicine.
All right. There had been a question from Annette Adiambo about payment during the work-based assessment. Is one paid?
Payment?
Yeah, is one paid during the work-based assessment?
No, they don't pay during the workplace-based assessment. So actually some workplace-based assessment you have to pay. So there are different systems. So you have to pay because when there's one of the PowerPoints I showed, AMC clinical is around $4,000. Work-based assessment, you have to pay around $650, $700. So you actually pay for the workplace-based assessment because it's an assessment. So you don't get paid. It's self-sponsored, you have to pay for it.
All right. Another one from Esther Kitulu. What is the range of clinical cases that you find in Australia? Because for most developed countries, she hears there's more non-communicable diseases than infectious diseases. Are you able?
I completely agree. Yep, I completely agree. So most of the things here, it's chronic diseases like hypertension, diabetes, cancer. In terms of infectious diseases, I think actually COVID is the first real one they've had. They don't have much HIV, they don't have much TB, they don't have malaria. People don't even sleep under mosquito nets. So there's no, in terms of infectious diseases, the ones that I've seen commonly is they have a lot of sexual transmitted diseases, the STIs, the syphilis, the gonorrhea. But in terms of like TB, malaria, they don't have that. So it's more of the chronic diseases. It's more of the cancer, it's more of the hypertension, diabetes, and mental health issues as well. So it's all that.
So she goes on to ask, how does that impact re-entry into the Kenyan system? When you come back.
I don't think it, yeah. So that's why you have to also keep yourself upgraded with knowledge. So even if you come here and say you get a lot of cancer, hypertension, diabetes patients, and it also depends on what speciality you want to go to as well. So for example, if you want to become a GP, you come to Australia, you mostly see non-communicable diseases, but that doesn't mean that you don't. So it's up to you to actually keep yourself updated. You have to keep on, like for me, we have our 2015 group. We have a WhatsApp group and we have a Facebook group. So people usually post in cases there. So I make sure it's my own effort to make sure that I get updated to what's happening in Kenya as well, because you can't completely shut off. You can't completely shut off what's happening back home. So I do get to discuss with some of my friends back home. Sometimes we have even like a Zoom call and talk about cases. So I keep myself updated as well. It doesn't matter. So it's your own personal effort to make sure that you keep yourself updated on both non-communicable and communicable diseases.
Okay, a question from Michelle before I hand over to Alisi. If you do the work-based assessment, does that exempt you from doing the AMC clinical exam?
Yes, you're right. So if you do the work-based assessment, that is an alternative to the clinical exam. So you don't have to do the clinical exam. And that's why most people actually don't like doing the clinical exam, because it's, number one, it's very expensive. And number two, it's very tough and difficult. So most people prefer to do the work-based assessment. Yes, so you're correct. If you do the work-based assessment, you don't have to do the clinical exam.
All right, over to you, Alisi.
Okay, yeah, I'm still getting a couple of questions in the inbox. You can continue asking, by the way. So there's a question here. You mentioned you did a non-clinical, I don't know if you can say a non-clinical master's. So someone is asking, how do you find work? And in case you've come with your spouse, can they also find work? And then the other question is it sustainable going there when you're doing a non-clinical master's? Like, can you support yourself? So is it sustainable? So yeah, that's the first question.
Actually, if I'm to be honest with you, the funny thing here in Australia is it doesn't matter what you do. You can even be a cleaner. Like in terms of salary, there's no much gap between the poor and the rich. You can find a cleaner almost earning the same as an accountant. So in terms of the cost of like salary, they pay everyone quite well. So the gap is not too wide. So for me, because I'm a health manager at the moment, so I'm a health program manager, the salary is actually not too far off from a doctor. So it's almost the same, if not even more than an entry level. So it depends also on, it depends on how many years and how much experience you get. So for me, the more experience I get, the more, of course, the more money you do get. So it's hard to get an unclinical job like a health manager, because you can imagine they have their own local graduates. They have all these international students who come to do the course. So what makes you get that job is things like volunteering, things like connecting, things like, you know, all those kind of things. That's what made me get the job that I'm in. So it's not too far off in terms of salary here. So in Australia, the difference is not much. It doesn't matter what to do. So the salary range is almost similar. So like an accountant and a doctor can earn the same. Even a lawyer can even earn more. So the range is not quite different as well. So getting an unclinical job is not easy, but once you get it, the pay is also not bad.
Another question. So you already said that when you're doing MEd, you're paid. The question someone has is, like in our situation in our country in Kenya, you also pay when you're doing MEd. So the question is, do you also pay in Australia when you manage to do your postgraduate? Like, wherever you manage to do it, do you also pay them in addition to, even though you're also being paid as a doctor?
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, thanks for that. So, you know, the way these developed countries, there's that student loan and student debt. So I think they do pay, but I'm not sure. I'm just gonna have to confirm that in terms of specialty. I don't want to give the wrong information. So I can take that down and then I can come back to you. I'm not too sure about that, because I do know that they get paid, but in terms of them paying, because I do know like USA, they have the student loans and the student debts they have to take from the government. So what I know is the government usually trains them and then they kind of have to pay them back. But in terms of the costs and the specific amount, I'm not sure. So I can take that and then I can come back to you.
I can see there's
I think what I've realized as well, I don't have much knowledge in terms of like specialties. I'm quite more conversed with like the GP and the standard pathway, because that's where I'm at the moment.
I see there's a hand raised. Samantha, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Thanks so much, Nikita. Thanks so much, Doc, and thanks so much, Arisi. So I'm pulling the questions from some of the polls that from the poll that you had done earlier on. I'm seeing regarding cost, there are three questions. I'm not so certain if we're able to address it. So the first one is someone is asking if you had mentioned, of course, it's hard to get a scholarship, and someone wanted to know, like, what are the popular scholarships that people apply for, and then are they usually government and private loan services that can be used to subsidize the academic fees, either from Kenya or from Australia? Then I'm seeing there is another question on like, what are the best ways of raising money to study and relocate abroad, e.g. harambes, bank loans, savings, or side hustles? And then the last question, since it's still on cost, like, could you elaborate on the kind of jobs you'd have to do to sustain your living or studies?
Thanks, Samantha. So I think you'll have to take me slow. So the first question was about scholarship and the best ways to raise money. So I'm not going to lie to you, it's really difficult, especially the medical field. I don't know why it's quite difficult. So it's really difficult to get a scholarship here in Australia, because here in Australia, the ones I've really seen are from specific countries which have, you know how our government is. So the countries I've seen coming forward is like Asian countries, India. Some of them as government, they work together with Australian government to give them that scholarship. So here in Australia, from a Kenyan perspective, getting a scholarship is very hard. But from Kenya, what most people do is, at least that's what I was encouraging people to do, your internship and do maybe at least 1 or 2 years. Because when I came here, at least I had some money saved. So it doesn't make life very difficult. So getting a scholarship, the most one that I've seen is called Commonwealth Awards, Commonwealth Scholarship Awards for Africans. But unfortunately, they have specific criteria, that they have specific occupations like trading, agriculture, things that are gonna help your country, things like agriculture, things like, I don't know, mining. And the bad thing about the Commonwealth Scholarship is once you finish your exam here, you go back. I mean, if you want to stay here and get your permanent residency, that's not allowed. You'll have to go back home, because for them, they say, if you've given you a scholarship, you have to go back home and then help your people, because we don't want you to stay here. So in terms of scholarship, it's really hard. Myself, I tried to get one before I came here, and it was such a hassle. It took me quite a lot of time. So getting a scholarship is quite difficult. Some of the scholarships they give to Kenyans who come here in Australia are not really like for doctors. It's like for people who are doing education or agriculture or some other occupation. But as a doctor, it's a bit tricky. I don't know why, to be honest, but yeah, so it was self-sponsored for me. And in terms of taking a loan, some do take loans. For me, I came as a self-sponsored. I saved a bit of money because I worked for like around 2.5 years before I came here. So I kind of saved my own money. And my parents kind of also helped me when I came here with the school fees. So some do take loans as well. Some take loans. And some, for me, I did get somehow, not really half scholarship, but I did work in the refugee camp. So the refugee camp kind of helped me. They gave me, that was really privately. They said, oh, because you've done a good job, so we'll give you maybe half of the money for school fees, and then we kind of added to the other one. So it really depends. Yeah, it depends. But getting like grants and scholarship from the government, that's a bit tricky. So unless your own workplace sponsors you or your parents sponsor you. What was the other question, Samantha? Sorry.
Oh, okay. So the other question was, I think, mostly on the side hustles the kind of side hustles that you do to sustain living and studying there.
Okay, thanks. So when you come on a student visa, you only get to work 20 hours a week. So that's a cutoff. So Australian people are quite smart because they know you've come here as a student. And then once you graduate, once you finish your studies, now you get full work rights. So when I came here as a student, I had only 20 hours a week to work. And these people they follow you. And if you work over, they deport you back home. So first of all, you have to make sure before you come here as a student, make sure at least, and even when you're applying for the visa, they usually say, make sure you show us that you can sustain yourself for 1 year in Australia. They want to show the money they want you to show them the money in the bank account that you can be able to supply yourself in the first 1 year. So the kind of jobs you do here, I'm not gonna lie to you, because when you come here as a student, first of all, you can't even practice because you didn't come here. Maybe you haven't done AMSUN, or you don't have the registration to practice here. There are a lot of casual jobs that people do. So what most people do is they work in disability. So you take care of the disability people, the aged care. I'm not gonna lie to you, I'll just tell you as it is. So some work in disability, some work in aged care. You like take care of the old people. Some do tutoring work, if you're lucky to get that. But most of the jobs are really hand jobs. Like some work even in the cafe, some work in bakeries. But the good thing here in Australia, though, even if you work those casual jobs, the pay is not that bad. Like you can be able to pay your rent, and paying your school fees when you're studying is a bit tricky unless you really work more than 20 hours, which is quite risky because you can be caught. So if you can come here at least with the first 1 year of your study catered for, and then the rest you can just chip in bit by bit. So there are a lot of casual jobs to go around. Some of them are not really fancy jobs, because imagine taking care of disability or old people. Some have done those for years to pay for their school fees. The pay is usually not bad, but it's not those fancy jobs that people usually think that, oh, I'm going to Australia. And for me, I worked in a cafe, I worked in a bakery, and to kind of at least pay my rent and all that kind of stuff. And if so long as you have your goal on point, then it won't distract you from the main course. And I was lucky because after I did finish my graduation, then last year I was able to kind of get an averagely well-paying job after that. So there are a lot of casual jobs, not very fancy ones, but they do kind of pay the bills. What was the other question, Samantha? Sorry.
I think you answered all of them. Yeah.
Okay.
On Harambe's, I think you partly, in a way, answered that.
Yeah, that is totally subjective. It totally depends on where you're coming from, how much money you can raise. That one is quite subjective.
Some more questions from the chat box.
Mm.
Do you mind sharing some of the contacts where international doctors can volunteer so as to get networks for job applications?
Yeah, sure. I can add that to the list of the things that I'll email back to Arisi. So it's a bit hard because like volunteering here is a big thing. They have their own offices and you have to come in person as well. So you can't apply when you're in Kenya. So some of these jobs you can't apply when you're already in Kenya. You have to be here physically to apply because they want you to do the police check. They want you to do all those kind of things. So these volunteering jobs, you have to already be here. You already have to be here in Australia, but I'll share some of the places.
A question from George. You had mentioned that the work-based assessment is 3 months.
It usually depends because they start as level 1 supervision, but mostly it goes for 6 months averagely. Yeah, they averagely go for 6 months.
A question from Director Norman Mureithi. Are you paid while studying Masters in Healthcare Management? How did you sustain yourself if not? I'm reading it out loud, but I think you've answered it already.
Yeah, you are not paid when studying health management. I was not paid at all. You're actually the one paying the government. So for my whole course, just costs only, it was around $60,000. That's almost, yeah, that's a lot of money. But I was lucky because where I was working in Kenya, they kind of gave me a little bit. So it depends on your situation, but it's not little money, it's a lot of money.
A question from Esther Kitulu. How much money would one need to move roughly? And those share houses, how do you get them? Like, do you apply online while you're still in Kenya?
Good question, Esther, good question. So how much money will one need to move roughly? It totally depends. So when you apply for the visa, when you go to this agency, I told you about a couple of agencies back home. So I used Australian Education Council. So they'll let you know how much money you will need to move. So it depends on the state where you're going. Different states have different costs of living, but here in Brisbane, Queensland, for the first 1 year, at least you should put 1 million on the side. On the first 1 year, at least put 1 million on the side because you're not sure if you're gonna get a job. So 1 to 2 million, at least for the first 2 years. And then the share houses, how do you get them? So there's a lot of online links. I can also send that to Arisi. There's one called Rental Estate. There's one called Gumtree. There are a couple of links where you can get the share houses and they'll tell you how much the rent is, who is staying there. So, and you can apply when you're in Kenya, actually. Like for me, when I came here, I kind of applied when I was already in Kenya. So long as it's a bit hard, but you can get it also when you're applying in Kenya. Even when you're coming for, like, let's say, visitor visa, you can apply for that share house when you're already in Kenya. It's just a matter of going to the website and calling. They usually have contact numbers, so you just call them and book.
All right, a question from Prab. Let's scroll up and see it. So can you work as a GP after AMC 1, then later do the AMC 2 or the work-based assessment later on?
Yep, you can. It's hard to get those jobs. Most of them are usually in the rural areas, but if you've done your AMC 1 and you've done your English exam, those two things, you get limited registration. And there are some places which usually give jobs to this kind of people. And then you have at least 2 or 3 years gap to do the AMC 2 or the work-based assessment, because if you don't do it within that time, they'll renounce your AMC 1 and you have to begin again. But yes, you can, although it's quite difficult, but you can get a work as a GP after AMC 1 and after doing the English test. MD
Abroad asks, if you're registered as a doctor in Canada and in the UK would you still need to do the examination in order to relocate to Australia?
Wow, these are really good questions. You guys are clever people. I never knew you will ask these tough questions. But this is such a good question because if you've worked as a doctor in Canada or the UK, it's much, much, much easier to work as a doctor in Australia. So what someone actually did, I think last year, is I think they're from West Africa. They were doctors back in Ghana, Nigeria. They came here, they really tried to do the MC1, MC2, and they kind of couldn't work because it's quite a lot of money and I think it was hard for them. So they went to UK, did PLAB. Is it PLAB for UK, yeah? They did the UK exam and then they got registration there and then it was quite easy for them to get a job in Australia. So if you go to the AMC website, they usually say, if you're a doctor from the UK, the US, Canada, you don't need to go through all that. It's usually much easier for them. So I don't think they need to do the AMC one. I think they have their own pathway. They have their own pathway, yeah. But it's much easier, it's much an easier process. It's much easier to get a job from Canada, UK, Australia, yeah.
So I see that there are no more questions streaming in. Just give maybe.
Yeah, I'm seeing one more question I'm getting from my inbox. So the first one is, so you've mentioned a consultancy or a council for helping you transition to Australia. I think the main question this person asked, so like, say I want to move to Australia. So the process of getting a visa or going to the Australian High Commission, like what's the process like? Do I go to the commission? Do I start applying online? Like just that someone wants that clarified. Okay.
So what I did is once you go to this, even let me just type it on the chart. It's called AEC. It's in Westlands. It's called Australian Education Council. So once you go to this agency, I hope they're still there because it's been a while. So once you go to the agency, they literally do everything for you. You don't have to go to the High Commissioner. You don't have to go online. You don't have to do anything. So they just guide you through that process. So they apply everything for you. Like for me, I went to this agency. I asked them, I told them what I wanted to study. They gave me the different brochures for the different unis in Australia, the cost of living in different states. And then they guide you through that process of documentation, because there's a lot of documentation that you need to apply for the visa. So they do that for you. So if they ask you to give documents, you just take it to them. So they'll guide you through the whole process. You don't have to go to the High Commissioner or anything. The agency helps you in everything through that process.
Jackie Ngoge asks, how much does the agency charge?
It depends on which state you want to go to, because these agencies, I think, usually have some deals with the unis here in Australia. So it depends on the course you want to study, and it depends on the state you want to study. Like for me, I think I paid around 5,000 Kenya shillings. It wasn't much. For some, they don't even pay anything. Like actually for me, I didn't pay any fee because I think the way the uni deals with these agencies, I think once you pay the school fees to the Australian university, they already give a bit of cut off to the agency. So for me, I didn't pay anything, to be honest, when I went to the agency. Yeah, I didn't pay, because I think once you pay the school fees here in Australia, they have a deal on how they pay the agencies. So it depends, but not much.
Okay, so Esther is confirming. So we can just do the USMLE or the PLABs to make life easier, because the process for those is much clearer to us and it is more popular here.
Imagine I will say go for it. I would say go for it 100%. And if I knew, maybe I would have even done that, because the UK exams are much cheaper and I hear they're much easier, and it's much, the process is much easier to get a GP there. And then once you work for maybe 1 or 2 years in UK, it's much easier to come to Australia. So yeah, I would suggest that would be a much easier pathway. If your final destination is Australia, you can go to the that pathway of doing the PLABs first and then coming to Australia. I think that's good.
All right. So MD Abroad is asking, do you have any information on how to get to the UK for the application process, and any information on agencies in Kenya that help with this? MD Abroad, we're going to have several sessions. This was the first one. The kickoff session was with Dr. Mura. We're going to have one for the UK as well, and I think then your questions will be answered effectively. But Dr. Mura, feel free to contribute something to answer the question.
Okay. Oh, as also she's thinking about that, there's one question that someone has kept on asking. They're asking about taxes. So how is the taxes on the jobs that you do over there? Are the taxes high, or are they manageable? Yeah, just about taxes.
My laptop went off, so I've completely missed the last 1 minute.
So maybe Arisi can take the question again.
Oh, the first question is about taxes. So how are the taxes over there? Are they manageable? Are they too much, or can one live with them?
The taxes here are, it's much, of course, the taxes is much, but the good thing is you pay the tax compared to how much you earn. So there's different tax range depending on the salary that you get. And the good thing is every year, every financial year, like every June, July of every year, you do your tax returns. And if your salary is below a particular threshold, you get all your tax money back. Like I remember in my first year when I came here in Australia, I worked, the taxes were much, but because my salary was below that threshold, because I was a student, when I did my tax returns, I got all the tax back. So the tax is much, and it depends on the salary level though. So if you're paid much, it doesn't really hurt you, because the money is good as well at the end of the day. So the tax is much, but it depends on how much you earn.
I have a question also from someone. I don't know how true this is, but they're saying they're really excited learning about Australia. They're asking, they're not so sure if this is a myth or true. Like, they're saying, I heard you don't work when you're on your period. In fact, they pay you. Is that true?
No, that's not true.
Okay.
No, I haven't heard of that at all. No, that's not true. That's not true.
Sorry, I lost connection for a minute. Okay, so you can just continue.
Yeah, so that myth is completely false. Maybe other states, but I've never heard of such a, no, that's completely false.
My electricity also had a bit of an issue for a moment there. I missed the last minute or so. I think we should be done with the questions now.
I think there's a question that I've just seen popping up in my chat because I'm using my phone. So how bad is the snake issues in the cities? Oh my God, yes. there's weird animals in Australia. I've seen so many weird animals, but yeah, they're weird animals really. So I've seen a couple of weird animals, but they're not like so many that you're gonna be scared. I mean, there's a couple of snakes here and there, and it depends on which areas you're living, but the animals are mostly in the remote and rural areas. In the cities, not really much.
Right. And finally, SK asks, are there student loans since the fees are a bit expensive? I recall you had mentioned public or private loan facilities, but maybe you can answer again.
Student loans, it's really hard. So when you come as an international student, you know, being a student in Australia, that's like their business. Education, international students in Australia, it's like a business to Australia. Actually, they're quite impacted because of the COVID, because students are not coming in. So getting a loan then is a bit difficult. But there's some countries where they have deals with Australia where they do get student loans, like Japan, China, they do have student loans. But for Kenya, I've never seen anything about Kenyan. So it's hard to get student loans when you come here. But sometimes they usually have different unis have different support services. Like the uni I was in Griffith, they had a bit of student loans, but it's small money here and there. They can have shopping vouchers to help you. So it's not much, but just to keep you, to just support you through the student journey.
All right. So
okay, before I have to interrupt you, someone, I think her name is Esther. Okay, so is asking for just like a summary. So she says like stepwise approach, like say she wants to now work as a doctor, like she's been hearing everything, but just wants like a summary, like say stepwise approach, like a finished internship, I've worked maybe for a year. So what steps will I take eventually to now become a doctor in Australia? Like just summary, like just a short summary.
So what I'll say first before I say the summary is everyone has different approaches. So there's no proper approach that is the best, because people have done, I might tell you, do this, do 1, 2, 3, and maybe it doesn't work for you. Someone else do that one and it will work for them. So there's no stepwise really, because different things work for different people. But let's say step 1 in this circumstance, what I would have done if I knew this information before will be finish my uni, finish my internship, work for 1 or 2 years, save some money, and then during that period that you're working as an intern and you're working as a MO, do MC1. Study for MC1, do MC1. At least have that in your bag before you even think here. And if you want to do the MC1, you can, during that time you're working as an MO, you can save a bit. Take your visitor visa, come to Australia, do the MC1, stay here for 3 months, take leave and see how Australia is, go back to Kenya, maybe even work for maybe 1 more year, so long as you have your MC1. And maybe you can also do your English test. And then after that, you can start applying for jobs. Even in Kenya, you can start looking for jobs where you can apply with the limited registration process. But sometimes that doesn't work for people. What others will do, they'll do their MC1, they'll do their English test, and then to kill time, because you want to learn the local health system, you can come here on a student visa, because getting a student visa is very easy. You can come, maybe do a course for 1 year. During that 1 year, maybe do the work-based assessment or do the Part 2 clinical exam. And then after that, look for employment and become a doctor in Australia. That's one step. Another one might say, okay, do my internship, work for 1 or 2 years. Within working that, because there's a lot of time people waste when you're working as MWs. I did waste a lot of time. During that time, you can, let's say, for example, do PLAB in the UK. Do PLAB in the UK, go to UK and maybe work for 1 or 2 years. And then once you have that UK registration, apply to be a doctor in Australia. It's much, much easier. So that's another step that people take. So those are the 2 things I would say really. Do your internship, work for 1 or 2 years. And within that time, you might also know what you want to do more, what country you want to go. So within that time, don't jump straight into traveling abroad and settling there quickly. Just take that time to really, because you also want to learn the practical stuff. And here in Australia, they have a lot of technology, they have a lot of things. So it's good to learn in Kenya, those hands-on. By the time you're coming here, you're already a good doctor. Do your internship, work 1 or 2 years, and then you can now decide to apply to go to abroad.
So we have been asking you questions for about an hour. Do you have any challenges to pose?
think she's gone off.
Yeah, I think we've lost her. Let's just give her maybe a minute.
I hope you guys have learned one or two things. I mean, I'm not 100% knowledgeable in this area, but at least I'm here and I've learned quite a lot. So I hope you've learned one or two things that can help.
Yes. In fact, it's been very eye-opening. I think that's what most people are telling me. They're actually learning a lot from you. Yeah, and there are many, before this, you usually don't know what to do exactly, how to start, where to go. So I think you've really helped us see so much and see things in a different way. Yeah, and we are really glad to have you, really glad you came.
Thank you so much. I'll email back the thing I promised to email you, and then you can share it with the group. The AMC website has everything, so I'm going to link it up there. The AMC website has what you need for your AMC1, the locations you need to do for your tests. I'm going to put up some books that you need to revise for the AMC1 as well. So I know I have a couple of homeworks that I'm going to send you, but I think this is really good. And next week you can hear about Canada and say, yeah, I want to go to Canada. And but Australia is what I think the parting shot is. It's a challenge. It's a long journey. You have to really put yourself out there. You'll have really long days. You'll have bad days, but at the end, the journey is quite rewarding. But you have to really be proactive and be ready to accept that it's not an easy pathway. But once you get there, then it's quite rewarding.
Okay. Yeah, just this is for everyone. I'm getting a lot of questions about whether we'll share the recording. So guys, relax. Through your class reps, you'll get the recording. Yeah, because I'm getting like thousands of messages on that. Yeah, I can see Nikita is back. Nikita was asking something, and I think I'm not seeing any more questions. You'll also be planning to wrap up. So I think you'll also, okay, Nikita, take it off first, then we'll.
Thank you very much, Arisi. I was posing I was telling Dr. Mora, we've been asking you questions for about an hour. Do you have any challenges to pose to us? Any questions?
Not really, just to really appreciate the work you guys are doing, because I wish I had this kind of information. I was still a student, and just to really encourage you, the medical journey is not an easy one. It's not, it's something that you really have to plan yourself. You can be a doctor, but you have to have a doctor with a meaningful life, and don't follow the people want to do internship and then jump to being a specialty. No, just don't follow the crowd. Just do what you really desire. Because I've seen some doctors, they do internship, they go do paid for 2-3 years. They say, oops, this is not what I really want. I want to do med. I mean, so just make sure you take time, even if it's 1, 2, 3 years. Don't rush and make really informed decision. And I would like to see some of you guys here. And my home is open. I leave that journey from house share, and I have my own place, so my house is open. If anyone wants to do an exam, happy to host them.
Thank you very much for your anticipated hospitality. We will be coming.
Karibuni.
So guys, don't log out yet. We want to inform you of the other upcoming sessions. Arisi, do you have anything else?
Before I leave, I'm going to send you guys some of the things that I've said I'm going to check out. And if there are any other questions I've not answered, feel free to just write it to me, and I can maybe kind of answer in another recording, or just try to type it up.
Thank you.
Okay. So before you leave, first of all, I'd like to thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for giving us the time, because you're busy. I think, in fact, people don't know that in your place, it's now what? It's 5 or 6 p.m.
Now it's actually 6:30 p.m. Yeah.
6:30 p.m. Yeah, so we really appreciate you taking time from everything and just coming and helping us a lot. Yeah, so we also are happy that you are an alumni of your end and you've done great things out there. So we are proud of you. Yeah, sometimes you look down on our school, but we are really proud of people like you. Yeah, and anything else I'd like to add? Yeah, feel free if you want to join any of the other sessions which Nikita will talk about. Yeah, but all in all, we want to thank you as the entire student body, and we'd like to just really appreciate, and we'll always be in touch, and we'll keep talking to you. So we really appreciate it. So maybe just to ask you if there's anything you'd like to ask us, anything you think we should improve on, as this is actually organized by External Affairs Committee with Samantha. in charge. I don't know if Winnie, the chairman of AMSUN, is around. So maybe you can just tell us things you think we should improve on, something we should add for the student body. I think going to this year, the AMSUN committee wanted to like make AMSUN teach students more than just about their school life. So maybe something you think we should improve on, add on, or anything you just want to tell us as undergrads. Yeah.
Really, I think maybe not at the top of my head at the moment, but take care of your mental health. Very important for medical students. Do what you love. Don't follow the crowd. There's a lot of pressure from families, from yourself, from your colleagues. Don't feel pressured. Just follow your path. Make sure you just take care of your mental state, take care of your physical body, and really, yeah, just be focused, really, nothing much. But in terms of, because I'm not sure what programs you have, maybe the more we engage later on, the more maybe we can talk about what other things we can do.
Okay, thank you so much. I think now I'll hand over to Nikita and Samantha. They'll finish up on the program. Thank you so much, Dr. Mura. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. So I hope my screen share is visible. Can someone confirm that? Arisi, is the screen visible?
Yep, it's there.
Yes, we can see you. We can see you, Nikita.
Thank you. So this has been our first of several talks in the Study Abroad online series. There's a high demand among the undergraduate students studying medicine in Kenya to find out more about how to leave the country for greener pastures. Not that there's much that we can say on record about the current situation, but yeah. So AMSUN put together this series, starting with the Australian one that we're about to conclude. Tomorrow we're going to have a talk from Dr. Maugo about studying in Canada, working in Canada. Then the following weekend, we're going to have a talk from Dr. Ritika on the 3rd of July about opportunities for people who studied medicine to work and study in the UK. Next, we're going to have a talk on Sunday, the 4th of July, that's next weekend, Sunday, from Dr. Rithim. And then finally, we're going to have a talk from Dr. Nitesh on opportunities for young doctors in South Africa. So take note of the dates, take note of the times. We're going to be using the same login details. Make sure that you type your name, don't type MD Abroad, so that then we can make it more interactive. We will be seeing you there. And as we end the event, I'd just like to acknowledge the efforts of all these people whose names are on the screen. That's been the organizing committee. The medical students who are passionate about broadening the horizon for themselves and everyone else as well. So asanteni sana for all the hard work. I will hand over to Esther to do the vote of thanks, and then we can call it a day and see each other tomorrow for the next session.
Thank you, Nikita. Hi, everyone. My name is Esther, and I've just been asking a lot of questions because I'm very interested in Australia because of the many things I have heard. I want to thank the speaker. Thank you so much, Dr. Mura. This was very
Esther, you're breaking up. We can't hear you clearly.
okay. Maybe it's my network. How about now? Is it better?
Yeah, I guess it's better.
Yeah, it's better.
Okay. Thank you so much. I really hope you can hear me well now. Like, it's a project, my voice. Thank you for everything, Dr. Mura. Thank you for coming. This was really informative. Like, we got really so much information that you can actually work with. Moving on, for those of us when you tunatafuta greener pastures, I understand there was a lot of panic, especially when the government announced the new fees for MED, the new rates, and now doctors allowances, all those things are happening. So there's a lot of panic, especially for young doctors, and we're really looking out for what more is there. I can see my friend Calvin is here. He's at MO. We got so many people interested, not just the students, even MOs who are already working. We have so many jobless MOs. So really, it's something that people have been looking forward to. Thank you so much. Thank you, Nikita and Arisi, for the great work you've been doing. You've presented all our questions like really, really well. Thank you, Samantha, Winnie, Philip. I'm just naming AMSUN committee members who I have seen around. Philip for facilitating the recording as well as the video session. I also want to thank the other unis guys, like people from other unis who took the time to join us. Guys, it's really important for you to know what else is out there for you. The doctors who are here, welcome, and join us tomorrow as well. From the AMSUN academic part, it is also a great honor that students are actually exploring their horizons. Thank you so much. Without further ado, I'd like to close the meeting. See you tomorrow for the session on Canada. Bye.
Bye. Thank you very much, Esther, for the vote of thanks. So I think now we can all log out at our leisure. The information from Dr. Mora will be shared